All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for the CSA Ideas Lab today. We are the CSA Innovation Network, and we're very excited to be hosting a book chat and meet the author opportunity with author Jerry Apps and Maya from Fulcrum Publishing as a co-host for today's event. Jerry published On Farms and Rural Communities: An Agricultural Ethic for the Future recently, and we have copies of the book to give away to participants and are really excited to hear some of the lessons from Jerry's decades of experience in farming, being a professor, and just thinking about and teaching about agriculture in general, and about how this can apply to CSA and other small farms as we move into the future. So thank you so much for being with us today on this July afternoon. I know it's a busy time of year, so we really appreciate your time today. Today, we are going to just start with a very brief introduction to the CSA Innovation Network for those of you who might be new to our organization, along with Fair Share CSA Coalition, which is an additional organization helping us connect with Jerry today, located in Madison, Wisconsin. So I'll talk about both of those very briefly before handing things over to Jerry, who's the author on the call with us, also tuning in from the Madison area. And make sure to stay tuned through the presentation. Jerry's going to be talking about some key takeaways and lessons from his book, and then we will give away. I've got copies here to give away to those of you who are on the call with us. So we'll connect with you and mail these out after the call. So stay tuned through the presentation, and then we'll hop into a Q&A period before wrapping up this afternoon. So as I mentioned, the CSA Innovation Network is the organization who puts on the CSA Ideas Lab webinar series. We are a national group of technical assistance providers and some farmers who all work together in terms of supporting community-supported agriculture programs nationally and even internationally to an extent. We're really excited to have virtual and in-person opportunities to come together as a network and think about how we can support more equitable and strong CSA programs all over. So you can see here a photo of us just a couple of months ago. Our network members, many of them got to travel to New York and the Hudson Valley region to learn about farming in that area and plan continued efforts for the CSA Innovation Network. So that was some great time spent together. And Fair Share CSA Coalition is one of the host organizations of the CSA Innovation Network. So some of our Fair Share staff are in this photo who traveled with the CSA Innovation Network a few months ago. This is a local coalition of CSA farms in the Madison area, is where we started about 30 years ago, have since grown to Wisconsin and the Midwest at large. And we support thriving farms, vibrant communities, and fresh food for all. Investing in farmers beyond just CSA, though CSA is definitely a core area of support for us. So Fair Share CSA Coalition is the organization that Maya and Jerry had reached out to since we are local to them about connecting with farmers. And we felt that the CSA Innovation Network would be a great venue to elevate Jerry's work and lessons to. So Fair Share is the Wisconsin organization who's a member of the National CSA Innovation Network, and we're really happy to have connected Jerry through both of those. So as I said, make sure to stay tuned for the book giveaway following Jerry's presentation. So Jerry, at this time, if you want to go ahead and start sharing your screen, then we can get underway with your presentation. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about the book and lessons that you've learned over the decades of time spent working in agriculture. And then we'll have a book giveaway and question and answer time. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity to share a few ideas with all of you. I firmly believe that we are at a very crucial crossroads in agriculture in this country and in the world. And your group, the CSA group, is a very important part of that future. And I will say a few more things about that as we go forward. I grew up on a small dairy farm in central Wisconsin. And it was a time when we had very little in the way of conveniences. We had no electricity, we had no indoor plumbing. We had none of the things that we take for granted. We heated our drafty old farmhouse with wood stoves. And yet I learned a lot from those very early days of farming in Wisconsin. I learned how to work, for instance. And my dad who had a fifth grade education, by the way, and my mother with a seventh grade education. To graduate from eighth grade was considered a major achievement in the generation of my parents. And so and yet my dad was one of the smartest people I ever knew. He once said to me, he says, just be Jerry, just because you have a lot of education doesn't mean you know anything. And that's pretty important because there is a level of learning which farm people know, even though they may not be aware of it, that goes well beyond a collection of factual information. And I want to applaud that and help people discover what that is and help carry that forward as they live their lives in the country on a farm. How are you doing here?
We're good.
It's been an interesting trip for me. And speaking in terms of today's technology, as I mentioned, I grew up without electricity. The idea of what we're doing right now was so far in the future, we couldn't even envision what it was. So I want to share, once we get this thing to function, I want to share with you a little bit about what that early life on the farm was like, because to me, it was important. And I think that historical information is important for all of us who are looking to the future and looking to what farms and rural communities ought to be in the future. And one of the things that now you've got something working. Is it working now?
I'm just manually doing it.
Yeah, that's good. But can I do it here?
Just tell me when you want to move it.
Okay. Okay. I still run a little farm in central Wisconsin. I have 120 acres, and it's a tree farm, which is one of those unique kinds of farms that you find scattered around the country, particularly in the north. I don't grow Christmas trees. I grow trees for lumber and trees for pulpwood, meaning it's made into paper. As you can see from this slide, I have not only am I a writer, I've spent lots of years working as a county agent and as a professor at the University of Wisconsin. But I also do a fair amount of TV work. And if you go to my website, jerryapps.com, you will see a list of the TV shows I've done, and you can click on and watch them as well. And the TV shows are related to each of my several books. I've done 7 of the TV shows. But let's go on.
I'll go do the down.
Oh, I pushed the
There you go.
wrong button. Let's go back to some of the early years in agriculture in this country. And I find looking at that fascinating. In 1830, the population of the country was 12.8 million. 91% of the people in this country in 1830 lived on a farm or in a rural community. Contrast that with 2024, today. The US population is about 335.9 million, and 17.9% of people live on farms and in rural communities. However, how about the number of people on farms? Can we do this, Susie? Can we lower this down somehow?
They can see it. They can see it, the whole thing.
Okay. In 1820, as 72% lived on a farm. 1920, 30%. 1950, 15%. 2024, 2%. That is a fantastic decline. And why? Why is this going on? Why is that happening? I'll share you a little bit of that. But first, I want to give you a little bit more about what those early years, in my early years on the farm, go back to the 1930s and 40s. And here is a shot of threshing. And today, people don't have a clue what's threshing all about. Well, I was on the threshing crew when I was 14 years old, and we went from farm to farm, and we were threshing oats at this time at our farm. And it was kind of interesting because it was one way. Pitching off a load of oat bundles into the threshing machine was not an easy job. And if you were able to do that without stopping, without wanting to rest, you were declared a man, even though you're only 14 years old. This is our home farm. It's, well, you can see up the barn and the house, and that it looks like a wonderful old house, and it was in some ways, but it wasn't insulated, and it was colder than thunder in the wintertime, especially when it was heated with wood stoves. And the barn and the silo and all of the rest of the farm buildings I remember so very fondly, even though we had no electricity and there was no indoor plumbing, and we heated the place with wood stoves. And I'm a product of a one-room country school. I attended this school called Chain O Lake, no S on it, because there was only one lake which was connected underground with 2 or 3 other lakes, and thus some wise person said it must be spelled Chain O Lake, no S. 8 years I spent in that school, and what did I learn? Besides the so-called reading, writing, and arithmetic, I learned how to get along with people. I learned how to appreciate those who had less than I did. I learned the power of community and why it was important that we shared with others, whether it was at recess when we did the recess games. And mind you, we've got all 8 grades, grade 1 through 8. There wasn't any kindergarten. Those early beginnings, those early experiences at that one-room school did a lot for helping me understand what community meant, what helping others meant, etc. Well, there's my family when I was a little bit younger than I am now, and my dad and mom. I'm that gooky-looking guy in the middle there, and my little brother. My brothers are twins. You'd never guess it by looking at them. My brother Donald on the right side, my brother Daryl on the left side. Let me talk a little bit about what the community, what the villages were like in those early days that I remember so fondly. And this is the Wild Rose Milling Company, the grist mill. And there, it was water powered. There was a dam in the back. And that little building contained a generator so that the village of Wild Rose had electricity. For heaven's sakes, we didn't get electricity until 1947. They had electricity in Wild Rose in 1926. However, it was only on during the daytime. During the evening. I mean, why would you want electricity on in the daytime anyway? And it went on at dark and was turned off at 11 o'clock in the afternoon. Farmers in those days depended on the villages, and the villages depended on the farmers. Those are important considerations as we look at the history of farming and rural villages. The grist mill ground grain for the farmers. It was a gathering place as well. Farmers would, I was one of those who would come to the mill with my dad, and we would have our oats and corn ground into cow feed. and we would chat. And we would visit the Wild Rose blacksmith shop because we had no tractor. We farmed with horses. And horses and their harnesses had to be cared for. There was a lumber yard besides the blacksmith shop and the harness shop. There was a welding shop. All of these places were vital to the village and vital to the farming community about it. Then this is the Wild Rose Mercantile, which was a general store. The largest building in Wild Rose, interestingly enough, it still is. And in that building, all kinds of interesting things happened. It was a source of market to sell our farm goods. My mother had the chicken flock, which was very common, and she would trade eggs for groceries. And you say to people today, you were trading eggs, you weren't buying them? Well, that's what we did. We traded eggs for groceries. We traded strawberries for groceries. It was a way of keeping connected. Rural and urban, if you can call it urban America, were closely connected in those years. And as I pointed out, depended on other. Here's where we bought flour, sugar, and salt. And interestingly enough, most of the rest of the food we grew on our farm. That was true of everyone, the 30s, 40s, and even early 50s. There was a post office and bank in town. And the village was a place, in addition to the country school, that provided cultural activities for the community. And I can remember so fondly when the Chautauqua came to Wild Rose. And this is a photo of the Chautauqua tent from Chautauqua, New York. And they were on the road and they put on plays. And it was the first time I'd ever seen live actors. And they had pistols, and the pistols that shot, except there were blanks, but they scared the bejeebers out of this little kid who was watching all of this. I was both excited and frightened, and it was one of the cultural activities that made a difference in Little Wild Rose. The village had its programs with visiting speakers as well that came and spoke in the upstairs in the mercantile, and we would go there and listen to someone talking about whatever. And on Tuesday nights, we had free outdoor movies. There were outdoor benches on the sloping side hill that was adjacent to the Wild Rose Mill Pond. And I have all of these wonderful memories. I was sitting there watching a third-rate movie on the screen and listening to the bullfrogs in the mill pond. I've never forgotten that. And I mentioned the Chautauqua place. The years between, that's our old farmhouse, the years between 1929 and 1940 were the years of the Great Depression. And we, along with everyone else in this country, farmers, city people, everybody was hit hard by the Great Depression. But in 1935, in the year after I was born, there were 6.8 million farms in the United States, the highest number ever, 1935. And during the war, and this is a photo of my actual ration book, because every kid, every parent, we all each had to have a ration book, and this was it. Sugar, tires, gasoline were items that were rationed, and many men were not available to work. It was hard to get help on the farm because everybody was off. All the men were all fighting in the war. And then from 1945 to 1960, after the war, we began to see the number of farms decreasing dramatically. 1950, 5.38 million farms. 1960, 10 years later, 3.9 million farms. Electricity arrived to our farm in 1947. Tractors replaced horses in 1945. My dad bought our first farm all-H tractor. And I said, "Did you probably going to put the horses out to pasture?" He said, and I've never forgotten this, "I will never put the horses, I will never sell these horses. I said, why is that? No matter how cold it gets, a horse always starts. Just think about that. Tractor was something to get started when it was 10 below zero. Now today we see corn combines that have replaced binders and threshing machines, and corn pickers and corn husking bees all disappeared with the new modern equipment, which takes me back again to that old way of doing things, threshing with a threshing crew. What we had happening without people realizing it, that the cultural changes that were occurring, along with the technological changes, if you can call a technological change from a lantern to an electric bulb, we missed getting together, learning how to be a community. On a threshing bee, you went from farm to farm to farm, helping the farmer, no charge. It was a way of people helping each other in community, silo filling, corn husking. It was an opportunity for a community to develop and share and care for each other. And then the one-room schools all closed. And as I had mentioned, the country school was a community, an example of a community. And by the 1960s, most all of them were closed. And now the kids were bused to the consolidated school. And here is a wonderful picture of the students one year in my country school. And I'm this little character wearing bib overalls. I was so proud of my bib overalls. And these are my brothers in the front. Bib overalls were prized. They're part of it. But here we've got all grades. My brothers were probably, I don't know, second, third grade, something like that. And I was in, I don't know, fourth, fifth, something like that. And we learned in that school how to get along with each other, how to get along with poor kids. And many of us were dang poor at that time. And how we could help each other. I like to read. I like books, still do. And by the time I was in fifth grade, I was helping first graders learn how to read. And what a wonderful way to learn by trying to teach somebody something. Now, during that period of time, after World War II, the businesses that closed in our community, in our village of Wild Rose, the grist mill closed, cheese factory, blacksmith shop, hardware store, meat market, mercantile, clothing store, pharmacy, car dealer, all closed. And so what kind of a village is left when all of these businesses closed? The taverns remained, yes, and there was a bowling alley, but almost all of the kinds of activities and businesses that we appreciated had closed. So what do we got now? We've got a large percentage of our farms are making less than 350,000. 3% are large scale farms, and they produce, well, more than $1 million per year is the definition, and they produce 46% of total farm income. The small size family farm, unfortunately, is rapidly disappearing, and I think most of you know that. So the common crops, corn, soybeans, cotton, and beef, hogs, poultry, dairy, those were the emerging economic products. Farm numbers, 6.8 million, as I pointed out earlier, in 1935. And 2022, less than 2 million, for heaven's sakes, in this country. Less than 2 million farms left. The rural communities, people in urban areas sometimes take these for granted. Generally speaking, rural communities provide the urban community with water, food, energy, recreational opportunities. One of my goals in writing this book and in my work over the last many years, what can we do today to help the urban communities appreciate and once more learn to get along with and share with rural communities, urban and rural coming together rather than being split apart. The small communities, many of them are in poverty. There are few jobs available. They have inadequate health care. The internet is broadband internet's often not available, and there are limited cultural opportunities. There's a lot of variation in what I just shared. Some of them are doing pretty well. Many of them are not. Now, the country's future depends on its farms and its rural communities. Let me underline that. The country's future depends on its farms and rural communities. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. Our fundamental concern, land is more than dirt. Think about that. Land is more than dirt. Land has life, the Native American view. How what is done to the land today affects 7 generations from now, not just next year, 7 generations from now. And we must, whether we live in the city or we live on a farm, we need to consider the economic, social, and the spiritual aspects of the land. Land is so much more than dirt. It has an economic dimension, has a social dimension, but it also has a spiritual dimension. And so what's happening? We've got these huge farms. We've got in Wisconsin, last I checked, a dairy farm with 8,000 cows on one site. And industrial size agriculture reflects what many people were saying at the time, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Unless you get bigger, you're going to be out. Bigger is better. It's nonsense. It's not true. Bigger is better is not always right. Just having 8,000 cows in one place is not a wonderful thing. It's a bit of a challenge. Industrial agriculture. Just to say the word industrial means we are seeing animals as machines. When we look at rural landscape, we begin to see that we're more concerned with land and with plants and with animals. And bigger is not better. We've got all kinds of challenges, especially in terms of pollution with industrial size agriculture. So the anaerobic digesters help some, but it's still a problem. So, and can we, Susan, can we move this thing over a little bit? If I could read that.
Yeah, you just grab it.
The screen.
No, he wants to move the people's pictures over so we can read.
There we go. One of the things that I'm advocating, along with a number of my colleagues, is that sustainable agriculture, where we integrate plants and animals, is one example. Organic farming, which is true for many CSA farms, I know. And then community supported agriculture, CSA. What we're particularly talking about today. And for those who may not know what that's all about, I found a couple of quotations I want to read. Community supported agriculture, CSA, is one type of direct marketing consisting of a community of individuals who pledge support to a farm operation so that the farmland becomes either legally or spiritually the community's farm, with the growers and consumers providing mutual support and sharing the risks and benefits of food production. That's one of the best descriptions I have recently seen. The Rodale Institution, in a newsletter not too long ago, and I want to share just a couple of paragraphs from what they said. Over the past several years, community-supported agriculture, CSA, has taken root in North America with moderate speed. and it's gradually grown to as many as 1,700 farms. And that number is, there are those who suggest it's really twice that many. Against a surging tide of decline for small farms in general, CSA has set roots deep and wide. CSA is providing direct support for hundreds of small farms and clean local food for thousands of families. As side benefits, CSA is also establishing a matrix of environmental oases, building networks of families who are cultivating new and healthy aspects of community life and helping to share a new vision of agriculture. Those of you who are in the business of CSA agriculture need to be applauded and continue to be encouraged, for you are setting an example for many who share what I'm talking about, that we need a new look at agriculture. And it's not, and don't throw stones at me, it's not industrial agriculture. That is not our future, folks. That is not our future. Farm to table farming, that's another aspect of it all. We are at a crossroads where we need to consider all kinds of things: aquaculture, hydroponics. There are all kinds of alternatives with, and home gardens and community gardens and small space gardens and education in the schools. Oh my gosh, do we ever need to do that? There's all kinds of opportunities for helping kids. This happens to be a picture of the garden at my farm, where we've had a garden since 1967. That's a lot of years. And we grow all kinds of stuff in our garden. Let's see what else we've got here. The future of this country depends on vibrant rural communities and sustainable, environmentally friendly farms. CSA is setting the pace and showing us the future. And the more we can support what you folks are doing, the better off we're going to be as we look forward. As I mentioned earlier, we have a terrible problem today with this country dividing itself, pulling itself apart. Rural and urban people often not understanding each other, not willing to share much with each other, and not realizing that rural and urban America depends on itself, depends on its getting together, and needs to together develop a reverence for the land. It's a lot more than putting a place where you put a building or dig a hole for something. The land is more than dirt. It is more than an economic commodity. We need an agricultural ethic for the future. I haven't used that word except in the title. Haven't heard me say it. An agricultural ethic, meaning the goodness of something. The goodness of something, the goodness of the land. And you don't hear a lot of people in urban areas talking about a reverence for the land, an ethic for the future. Where can you find my book? Well, fulcombooks.com has it. Your local bookstore has it. Amazon has it. And with that, I'm going to stop and see what kinds of questions you might have. What challenges you might have for me. Am I off the wall with what I'm talking about? And let's see if you have some questions for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jerry. That was amazing to hear you talk your way through your history and all the lessons you've learned over the years, particularly to CSA and, the alternatives to industrial agriculture, with CSA being one of those. Before we get into questions for you, I actually did want to follow up on the book giveaway. So I have listed out all of our attendees with numbers attached to each person's name, excluding myself and Jerry and Maya. And then I am running a random number generator on Google. So I'm going to really quickly just call out the names of who is winning each one of the 5 books that we have available. And then I'll follow up with each of you after this presentation so that we can mail those out to you. The first number that comes back from Google is number 5, and that is Jackie Cleary. So Jackie, we've got a book set aside for you. I think Jackie might have hopped off. Oh no, there you are. Okay. And then next is Mark Garrison. So there's a book for Mark. And we've got one for Myrna as well. So we've got all of these attendees' emails from when you registered for the presentation. And then up next, we've got a book for Stephen McFadden. And then our last number here is number 6, which in my list is for Timothy Woods. So Tim, you are getting that 5th book of the 5 that we've got to give away today. Thank you all for hanging on through Jerry's presentation. And I will connect with each of you to get you a copy of Jerry's book. And now it would be awesome if you do want to turn on your cameras so we can see each other's faces. Feel free. Otherwise, feel free to send any questions that you have for Jerry through the chat. And we can work our way through those in the last 15 or so minutes that we have together. I do have a couple of questions prepared, so we can start with those while you all are mulling over your thoughts. And Jerry, I'm just going to start with a couple of questions. First is, how does knowledge of the past help us make decisions about the present and the future as it relates to agriculture? And all of the experiences and learnings you've taken away from your years working in agriculture and farming, how does that inform what you tell others and the decisions you make moving forward?
One of the things that I have learned as a historian and as a person who's lived quite a few years, and that is this: our future depends on our past. We cannot, this is a simple way of saying, we cannot know where we're going unless we know where we've been. And where we've been is often largely developed by the first, 10, 12 years of our life. And what beliefs and values we hold, which to me are foundational to the skills that you may have picked up and the knowledge that you may have gained. But underneath all of that are the values and beliefs, and that is carried forward into our adult life. And I taught a course at the university for years about this, and how to look at that past and look at those beliefs and values, identify them, and most of them oftentimes are hidden deep within our psyche. Pull them out, identify them, and then decide, is that belief and that value, is that still valid? For instance, the value of work. Oh my gosh, does work have any value? Yes, it does. And that's a good one to bring forward. A value that or belief I grew up with is, whenever you see a chicken hawk, shoot it. Well, as the years have passed and I've studied a lot of environmental stuff, you don't shoot every hawk, for heaven's sakes. You don't shoot any of them, tell you the truth. They're a valuable part of our environment. So that's maybe a longer answer to your question, but identifying our beliefs and values in our past and then bringing them forward and deciding which to keep. Along with, and we who grew up on farms learned a lot of things that a lot of people don't know, like how to use a shovel. I mean, that's all bloody simple. Everybody knows how to do that, but they don't. Be surprised when you see somebody with a shovel who's never used it before. They hardly know which end to use. Well, enough of that.
Yeah, thank you. We do have one question in the chat from Stephen, which is if Jerry, you could comment on the changing demographics in rural states. There are many food deserts where industrial agriculture is the dominating force. So do you think that CSA could be a way to provide better connections and good food for people in those rural communities?
I surely do. I think CSA has a place. No matter if you have a highly industrialized, a large population state, as some of them are, those are especially places where I think CSA can make a difference because it is so easy. And I hear this all the time because I have a foot in each. I live in Madison most of the time. I live at my farm some of the time. And so I know a lot of farm people. I know a lot of urban people. And the idea of understanding each other is a difficult one. So CSA is a model that I applaud because it has not only the reputation, that's the right word, for producing food that is safe, that is nutritious, that is fresh, but it's also done environmentally. And that's a stretch for some people. Today, especially when the almighty dollar drives everything, we've got to get over that. There's more to living than dollars. Oh my goodness, are people going to be unhappy when they hear that? But it's true. I firmly believe it. Appreciating the land, as my dad did with a 5th grade education, and he and I would stand out on a Sunday afternoon and look over a field of potatoes. And he would say, "Isn't that something?" And he would never say that's a spiritual thing or anything like that. He would just say, "Isn't that something?" And it was. We would spend all day shocking grain. And a 4th grader one time asked me, "Why were you trying to scare the grain?" We were shocking grain in a different way than trying to scare it. We were piling it in bunches so it could dry. Well, that's another example of when all of that 20-acre field of grain shocks. And if you want to see that now, go by an Amish community and you can still see that. And standing there and my dad would say, "That's really something to see, isn't it?" I've never forgotten that. That's the spiritual dimension that comes from doing the kind of work that CSA people are doing. It may not seem like that when it's 85 degrees out and you're hoeing potatoes or cabbage or whatever you're doing, but it is. So,
Yeah.
Good question.
To follow up on what you were just talking about it and like soil being more than dirt, how do you think in this day and age with industrial farming having such a large presence that CSA and other small scale farmers can find the resources to ensure that they don't end up just treating the soil as an economic resource only and that they can actually uphold that honor that you're speaking about?
I think there are multiple ways of doing that. And sometimes it involves what I would call a step at a time. Say you get one farmer with 5,000 cows whose wife hates gardening and would sign up for a CSA. And then they would have a discussion. And she would say, this is making all this up. She would say to her husband, you know what that is? I don't know what that is. I've got 5,000 cows to worry about. And pretty soon you've made an inroad. You've converted one person. It takes maybe one person at a time. But that person tells another person who tells another person. That's one way to go at it. To go at it whole bore with big editorials about how bad you are as an industrial farmer, that's not going to do it. That only creates a defensive barrier. It's how to embrace what you believe in and show the contrast with that person may believe in, or maybe he never thought about it. somebody told him, banker told him, that's what you ought to do. Take out a big old loan and buy a bunch of cows. And he never thought about anything other than I got to make my monthly loan payments. So you're shifting a mindset. It's much more than just an economic shift. It's a mind shift for people to think about doing what CSA is doing on both sides of it, as a recipient and as a producer. I wish I had a prescription that I could tell you, but I don't.
That's right. Yeah, that one step is a good start. And I think this connects back to Jackie's question that was sent in the chat, which is about bringing in young people to the profession. And I was thinking on something you had said earlier in your presentation about opportunities for educating the next generation, so that one person, whether it's someone from a farming family or an urban community, how do you connect them into CSA and small scale farming?
One way to make the connection, and I wrote a book with that as well, is the county fair. The kids, I will never get, I've done a TV show on that as well. Kids, the idea of watching a 3 or 4-year-old petting a lamb, oh my gosh. They'll never forget that. I mentioned that earlier, maybe. But the fair is a way of connecting urban and rural America. The farmers markets are another way. There are a whole bunch of ways. I'm advocating whatever we can do. The CSA is a leader in all this, how we can bring together this country into realization that unless we take care of the land, we're not going to have anything to eat one of these days. Simple as that. Or as complicated as that.
Yes. And Tim just said in the chat, agritourism plays a role, which is what came to mind for me too, in terms of getting people connected in agricultural spaces, the farmers and consumers who might not be involved in farming. Do you have any experience or any other thoughts around agritourism, like field days out at farms and farm workshops or
Maybe
bee
one of
pick?
those is a good idea. Yeah. I'll never forget. My little farm is 120 acres. It's a tree farm, and an environmental professor from the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh would bring his students out to my farm, and most of them were not farm kids. They were Oshkosh, Appleton, Fox Valley kids, and he would do this. I have a pond, probably 3-4 acre pond on my farm. He would sit these kids, first he would collect their cell phones. Oh, and then he would sit them down around the pond and he'd say, I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to do anything. Just sit there. And they would do that for 15 minutes. It's like 6 hours if you're used to looking at your phone every 5 minutes. And then he had them write, what did you just experience now? What a fantastic way of helping young people, well, to the young people, young men and women, to appreciate something more than what is available technologically, etc. Appreciating nature and the land and the sounds and what's going on when you are doing nothing. To me, that was a fantastic way of introducing a group of young men and women who were very busy. Everything was hurry, hurry up, just get a computer that works faster than the other person's and all that kind of stuff. By saying, look, slow down. Sometimes it's good to slow down. Sometimes it's good to think small rather than to think big. Sometimes it's better to think about what the other person is concerned with rather than what you're concerned with. Sometimes it's useful to think about, how can I help someone else? And all of those are ways of helping people see a broader perspective and connecting to the land in a new kind of spiritual, ethical way. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot in that statement. And we are already almost at our hour of time together. So I just have one more question for you, Jerry, that I think can also relate back to these big ideas about CSA and small scale farming. What benefits have you seen over time from CSA in terms of community, environmental, and health improvements that you would love to see more of?
Just one example that I am so pleased to share is when the urban family has little kids and they are invited to come out to the CSA farm and help with the harvesting. I mean, what a wonderful way of introducing young people to not only agriculture, big A, but where your food comes from. And I will never forget on our garden at the farm, one of my grandsons who lived in Colorado was visiting, and we were digging carrots. And he said, "Carrots come from the ground?" I said, "Yeah." "And there are big ones and little ones together?" "Yes." He saw carrots of what comes in the grocery store, the little ones in the package and the big ones in the package. Just that simple little activity CSA people can do when kids come out and they're harvesting something. I personally have taken for granted. I thought everybody in God's creation knows where a carrot comes from. Well, they don't. They don't know where radishes come from. They don't know where cabbage comes from. Anyway, the CSA can help a lot with that.
Yes, it sure can. I know that's one of the things that we focus in on at the CSA Innovation Network, is just trying to help strengthen the connection between consumers, people who want to eat local food but may not know how to access it, and then farmers being able to access those people. All right. If anyone has a last minute question or comment for Jerry, feel free to share that while I get our wrap up slides up. Tim, thank you for your kind note. Jerry, who said that your story reminds Tim of his grandfather's farm in Michigan, but that the grain threshing machines might not be something we want to bring back. Maybe that's something to leave in history. All right. So we did our book giveaway. Like I said, I will contact via email everybody who won with our random number generator from the audience today. Thank you all for tuning in. We went through Q&A, and now I just wanted to share a few last minute notes with you all. If you have any more questions or just want to stay connected with CSA work going forward, feel free to look at our website, the CSA Innovation Network website. You can also check out Fulcrum Publishing's website to find Jerry's books and many others. And then CSAcoalition.org is FairShare CSA Coalition's website, which is the organization that's a member in this National CSA Innovation Network that Jerry and Maya connected through. We have the links in these slides that will be sent out afterwards with the recording to Jerry's book, so you can get it for maybe some CSA members or friends and family. And then we also have many resources on our Innovation Network website, and we stay connected with folks regularly on Instagram and Facebook. So those are all ways to connect with us and with Jerry and his book. We do have another CSA Ideas Lab coming up in just a couple of weeks. It's actually one I'm really excited for. It's a virtual cooking class using the contents of a CSA. So that is happening on Sunday, so people can have a nice cap off to their weekend, Sunday evening dinner with a virtual CSA cooking class. Excited for that one. You can feel free to share that with friends and family or farmers who you know, to share with their members or farmers market regulars. And then we are also working on continuing to set up more events throughout the fall. One will actually be about how CSAs in New York State, in the rural areas of the state, connect into customers in New York City. We're working on getting a date set in September. So that is really similar topically to a lot of the concepts you were talking about today, Jerry, of connecting rural and urban people. And then on October 30th, we're going to be talking about how CSA farmers can reach customers through online sales and marketing with different techniques to bring us into the digital age. So that's all that we had for you today. Thank you all for sharing your time with us. Thank you, Jerry, so much for your time preparing for and giving this presentation, and for writing your book and sharing it with us. I'm so glad we connected, and we will see you all next time. Have a great week, everyone.